everybody. How is it going? Beautiful day here in Detroit. Nice and snowy outside, and headed to International House of Prayer, East Detroit, for noon prayer. It's Saturday and about 20 minutes to 12. There's a good discussion, or a good discussion on a topic of accountability and a topic of organic versus organized or institutional church, and of course we know that this is a hot topic and people have all sorts of different ideas, and there's some overlapping circles here. It's you got to be careful not to dive into something where everything that the other side believes is wrong and everything that you believe is automatically right. We've got to be open for some discussion and learning. I heard someone say once, if our theology is the same 5 years from now as it is right now, then we are not growing. And so we just need to keep that in mind. Now, with that in mind, we can talk about some things. I want to share just a real, what I think is simple, a real simple picture of why this accountability thing is so important, and why the organic thing, in my opinion, is not the best way to go. And I'll admit part of it might just be my personality, but I think it goes a little further than that. But here's the picture. In an environment where there's no accountability, or we could use words like where there's no expected response, or there's no call to action, or these types of things, where that's not happening, then it simply makes the missions, plural, excuse me, that the church continually receives, almost impossible to fulfill. And in my book, Covens in the Church, I deal with this pretty extensively. This whole idea of being responsive to leadership. And my follow-up book, Pharaoh in the Church, I deal with leaders, where leaders can't build their own kingdom, and they can't be controlling, and they can't have selfish ambition and all this kind of stuff. And so but here's the dilemma, and I'll get back to the other point in a moment. The people, as I address in Covens in the Church, the answer to fix the problem, if there is controlling leadership, is not to rebel and go do your own thing. So that's not the answer. And the answer for the leader, if the people are not responsive, isn't to put them into bondage. And so there's ways to deal with this. But you got to get the books to figure all that out. Pharaoh in the Church isn't quite ready yet. It will be soon. But anyway, so here's the idea. With the organizational church, or the institutional church, when done right, it makes it very easy to get stuff done. So, for example, here, we're developing we're developing a city prayer meeting in Detroit, and this is an all hands on deck kind of a thing. We did it back in Colorado, and an all hands on deck thing means there needs to be response. There needs to be accountability. And so if there's just an organic type of even just a relational kind of a situation going, well, then it is more loose. It's like, well, I'm not really sensing it, and I love you, and I feel God might have you doing this other thing, and not feeling it, not feeling what you're feeling, kind of a thing. And so what happens is you diminish the role of the prophet. You diminish that role of the one, the Bible says that God does nothing unless he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. And then it also says, can two walk together unless they are agreed? So the idea is that God will very often reveal something to one person. He'll reveal it to the prophet or to the leader, or the person that has responsibility to fulfill a mission. And the rest won't receive that mandate. They won't from God directly, but they'll receive it through the prophet. And yeah, I know this introduces all sorts of issues, but the answer is not to revolt from God's governmental system. And so the idea is that we need to hear from God, and oftentimes it's directly from God, and oftentimes it's through another person. And so, yeah, how does that work? You know, and so, you know, and a great example that I love to use when we were in Kansas City, Mike Bickle had this dramatic encounter with God, and I think he was out in San Francisco or somewhere, and God was just dealing with him regarding purity and holiness in the nation, and so he came back, and it was an amazing message that he shared about purity and holiness and all of these kinds of things. And what he did as the leader, he required everybody on staff. At IHOP, there's like, I don't know what the number is now, 1,500 people on staff or something like that. He required everybody on staff to install what do you call it? Like not a porn blocker, but an accountability system like X3 Watch, or use some of those kinds. An accountability system where everybody was required to install it. Well, if you're in a kind of an organic kind of a movement, you're like, well, I don't know, you know, I love Mike, and you know, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But this was a mandate. It was a call. It was a call to action, and this required 100% response. So in the organized church, when done right, and I understand it's done wrong most of the time, but when done right, there's instant response. You know, so for example, I can send out a message, say, hey, we need to all gather together tonight at 7 o'clock to pray. I've used this example several times now. Well, you know, if we understand that we are in a military, we're not just here just to encourage one another. We're not here just to worship God together. That's not the church. The church is a house of prayer for all nations, meaning there's mission attached to it. We're interceding for the nations. We're involved strategically to advance the kingdom. And so if we understand that the church has mission attached to it, then we've got to be able to respond. We've got to be quick to respond, and we need to be held accountable. So if there's a call to action and something's going on where, you know, somebody isn't on board, well, then you just start a process. Well, you talk with them. What in the world's going on? Is everything okay? We really need you on the wall. There's a gap on the wall when you're not there, and you know, you're valuable. You bring something that no one else can bring. You know, we need you there. We need quick response, because there's a lot of people's eternal destinies that are hanging in the balance. And so you start a process, but you know, but it's a great example. You know, if there's a call to action through a leader, through a prophet, you know, and it's specifically those that you are in covenant with. I mean, that's really where it comes into play. And well, then there has to be response. Otherwise, the mission is not fulfilled. And so, you know, someone made the point. You know, I was at a really good prayer meeting last night that was lightly attended, and someone got up, and this happens all the time. I understand the heart. This is not a critique of the situation. It's just something like just rose up in me. I'm like, okay, we've got to fix this. And you've heard this all the time. You know, in a small prayer meeting, you know, someone will say, well, you know, it doesn't matter what the size of the crowd is, where, you know, or you hear where 2 or 3 are gathered or whatever. And I totally get that, and it's totally accurate. But I'm really at the point where I'm tired of having to make excuse for an empty prayer room. The whole church should have been there. The whole church should be in position. The whole church, you know, should be praying. That's the expected response. And so, and then someone responded back. I put that on Twitter and Facebook, and he said, "What if, you know, the entire church would have shown up? And what if, you know, church, the people aren't showing up in the prayer room in response to the call of the leaders? And you know, here in Detroit, the city's doing bad, and people's lives are not so great, and there's depression, and financially people are not doing well, and all of that. But what if the prayer rooms were full, and what if we responded to the call to action? So anyway, that's why it's one of the main reasons for me why we've got, you know, this military mindset. You know, we've got to be in position. We've got to be on the wall. We've got to have ears to hear. We've got to respond to prophets and apostles and leaders, and it's really important to do that, because a lot of people go into hell. And so church has purpose way beyond just encouraging one another and worshiping together. It's to advance the kingdom large scale. So, all right, there you go. Blessings to you all, and let me know what you think. Bye.